Dr. Great.
All right, so whilst we are waiting for Martin, let me just do a
Yeah,
little bit.
hello?
Yeah.
Dr. Great. Okay,
Yeah.
then give me the 5 minutes to migrate to the laptop so that,
Oh, sure,
yeah, I
sure.
think,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. So
okay,
just go ahead. I'll do some talking points, then by that time you'll be fine.
okay,
Right,
okay.
so I'm going online, right? So hello and welcome to this edition of the Sankofa African webinar, right? A global and current affairs program organized by Brennan Associate Consulting Limited. My name is Benjamin Akwe. It's 2 p.m. US Eastern Time, 7 p.m. GMT, and 8 p.m. Mogadishu time. I take this opportunity to wish all our listeners in the US happy Thanksgiving and Black Friday shopping holiday weekend. For those joining us for the first time, the Sankofa African webinar serves as a bridge between the African diaspora and the African continent, in line with the AU Declaration of the African Diaspora, serving as the sixth region of the African Union. Sankofa African panel discussion serves as a platform that brings experts, policymakers, politicians, etc., from the African continent and the diaspora to discuss raging and contemporary issues as it relates to great power strategic objectives towards the African continent. For the past 1 year, we've been educating and informing our listeners in the diaspora and the continent about US government 3D strategy, diplomacy, development, and defense, and the Biden administration strategic objectives towards sub-Saharan Africa. Today's discussion topic, African Union Master Roadmap of Practical Steps of Silencing the Guns, 2020 as amended in Africa, election violence and security in Ghana's upcoming elections. Since January of this year, we've been engaging experts from the African continent and the diaspora on elections in Chad, Senegal, South Africa, DR Congo, Rwanda, Mauritius, etc. Today's discussions is a part 2 of Ghana's upcoming general elections, what is December 7, 2024. The first panel discussion titled AU Roadmap of Silencing the Guns in Africa, an assessment of electoral reforms and election settings that may bring political crisis in Ghana's upcoming elections was held February 23rd, 2024, within the Biden administration strategic objective of promoting democratic and security dividends, and by examining the African Union Master Roadmap of Practical Steps to Silence the Gun. To our listeners and viewers on the various social media platforms around the world, the African Sankofa is anchored on a myriad of perspectives. So there may be differences, opinions from our guests based on their expertise, knowledge, and experiences. The difference in opinions does not necessarily mean perspectives shared and are wrong, but reflect a divergence of ideas to address security challenges facing the African continent. Here we rely on narratives for our discussion programs. We know narratives are an integral part of African society. In our discussion, we use them based on research findings, policy positions, and realities prevailing in various African countries. The narratives help our panelists to present their perspective independently, which sometimes may diverge from official government organization policy positions. Today, we are joined by experts from academia, the legal profession, political parties, and the military to help us delve into the topic. These experts are either practitioners or scholars on the topic. Today, we have Colonel Alex Khan, who is joining us from Mogadishu. He is also a member of the African Transition Mission in Somalia. He has also served on the National Election Task Force for the Southern part during the 2020 election. So, Colonel, if you are here, you are welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we are also hoping to have Mr. who's a lawyer, a legal practitioner, and a good governance advocate who was joining us from Accra, Ghana. He's still trying to get his laptop set up. Then we have Professor Kwekuniama, who is a professorial lecturer of International Service, American University, right? He has decades and decades of expertise, knowledge, and experiences on Africa. I consider him as a Washington insider who has or continues to engage with African diplomats in the US and has been on the program on several occasions on our discussions on election situation in some of the African states, especially recently during our mid-year review on the African continent. So you are welcome, Dr. Newman.
Well, thanks for having me, Ben.
Thank you very much. We are hoping to have Mr. Jojo Parry, who is the national organizer of the National Democratic Congress, and Salam Mustafa, national youth organizer of the New Patriotic Party. Right. So whilst we are waiting for them to join, we will still have to continue. Given the importance of today's discussion topic, a week before the general election, we at Sankofa extended an invitation to the key players in Ghana elections management and law enforcement bodies, right? The Electoral Commission of Ghana and the Ghana Service. We decided to pass on the EC request for a formal invitation before the general not acknowledge, responding and participating in the similar formal invitation we sent to them. So they wanted a formal request a week before. So I said, okay, we'll pass that because in January, we did send them an invitation which they did not even acknowledge and responded to. Also, I have contact with the Director of Operations of the Ghana Police Service to have the PRO or their representative to join our guest. Did not yield any needed responses from their communication directorates. So regardless, we have to continue with our application. So without much ado, let's start the case by welcoming our opening remarks from our panelists. Now, I want all of you to put your opening remarks within the context of the political parties signing the peace pact to promote a peaceful electoral process and ensure that all political parties conduct their campaigns to promote national unity and stability. Because initially, the NDC were not willing to actually sign the peace pact, but yesterday they were able to join signing it. So I want you to put your opening remarks within that context. What signing of that peace pact means for the elections a week from today. So let's start with you, Professor Nuyama.
Thanks for having me. I think that it's a positive step to have all parties sign the peace pact. But again, what does it mean? Can it be enforced? If one party decides to not abide by the terms, do we have sanctions? And when will those sanctions kick in? And so, yes, the public declaration of intent is important, but it really doesn't mean much if we don't have a way of enforcing sanctions for violations. So, but having said that, I think that we're getting close to having a good elections. As with a lot of elections that we've had in Ghana, the tenure of the post-election violence tends to go with how close the results are and how much evidence we have of a rigging or otherwise. There's always going to be claims by the losing side that something bad has gone on. But there are also things that that's happening, and not that you're going to have a trouble-free elections, is how transparent the authorities are in dealing with those. So even today, for example, the issue of the ballot being exposed in Koforidua, or ballot paper shortages in Volta region and in Brong-Ahafo region, all those things. If you're going to have problems, because Ghana is now terribly sophisticated when it comes to running anything. So you're going to have problems. But if you own up and you deal with the problems in a transparent manner, it calms people's minds. What you don't want is the idea that somehow somebody's colluding behind the scenes to try and help the government rig elections, the ruling party rig elections. So if you deal with your problems openly and you acknowledge them quickly, you can allay public fears, and then you do the best you can, and you lean on the political parties to abide by the terms of the peace the pact, and then you hold them accountable.
All right, thank you very much. Let's also acknowledge the presence of Professor Dr. Gloria Ajami. She is joining us from Sweden, originally from Kenya, right? So thank you for joining us. Let's go to you, Alex. Alex, what are your thoughts? What are your opening remarks in terms of the political party signing the peace pact to promote peaceful electoral process.
Okay, thank you very much, and good evening. I think it's a good sign that at least we've seen some form of will, political will, to hope that everything will go as planned, everything will be peaceful, losers will accept their loss, and winners will celebrate their win. So it's good, like Doctor said, let's see how the implementation will be, whether it's going to go as everybody wishes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's come to you, Martin. Right, what are your opening remarks in terms of the political party, the major political party, the NDC, which has initially refused to sign a peace pact some weeks ago? What are your thoughts on that? Briefly, your opening remarks. Martin, if you can hear me.
Yeah, hello, Dr. Akwe. Okay,
Yeah.
so you will take it whilst I try to get my video on.
Okay,
so this is, my initial thoughts are that, look, as a society, to be honest, we failed ourselves. You see, this peace pact, that it's not worth carrying that much weight for the symbolism we are trying to portray. It's a non-starter. This peace pact is a non-starter because, you see, a few months ago, the NDC refused to sign it because they wanted the 8 deaths, the deaths that occurred in the 2020 elections, to be addressed. So to the extent that we've not done much in addressing those issues, we have no business signing any peace pact. That pact is not worth the paper on which it is written. It's a shame. I mean, because I just sit back and I'm like, you know, the NDC has been railroaded into signing this peace pact because it appears, I mean, they are the favorites in the elections. So if they refuse to sign, I mean, they are going to lose votes. And they will lose, even if not votes, at least they will lose a lot of goodwill. That's why they have gradually signed it. But for me, because I'm not a party person, I should be able to say it as it is. We have no business signing the peace pact to the extent that we have not addressed the deaths that happened in the 2020 elections. 8 deaths. And we've had, 4 years, a lot of pussyfooting. You don't find any commitment by state institutions to investigate these deaths and to bring perpetrators to book if there are any. So, I mean, if I had my way, the NDC shouldn't be signing this peace pact because it's like, oh yes, let's forget about what happened in 2020. Come and try again. And as I mentioned, my sense of the matter is that NDC has gradually signed this peace pact because they are front runners in the elections. So they don't want to do anything to annoy, so to speak, voters. That is it. But
all right, thank you very much. We will dig into some of the issues that you have raised, right? Especially when it has to do with the Short Commission report. We'll get into those things first, right? So let's go straight to our discussion today. I've sent you the narratives already. So let's start with you, Dr. Nuyama, right? I'm going to focus my attention on the communique from the African Union Peace and Security Council, right? Where they make the argument, they made a statement praising those African countries that have helped since January up to now. So my question to you, as a Ghanaian foremost, so I just want to establish you are a Ghanaian. Those who will be watching us on the social media, they should know that as a Ghanaian and an expert on Africa with enormous experiences, expertise, and knowledge of Ghana's democratic transition and consolidation, as elections in Ghana since the inception of the Fourth Republican Constitution and achieved its aims of disciplining politicians, as acknowledged by the AU Peace and Security Council, and in terms of deepening and consolidating peace, security, stability, and sustainable development in Ghana? Has election been able to do what it's supposed to do?
Well, the question is, what are elections supposed to do? So there are two different things here. One is a process argument. Okay, so in terms of a process, elections gives us the best way of picking our leaders. So the power alternation mechanism works. So in terms of that, Ghana's had 8 elections successfully with transition back and forth. So in terms of power alternation, management, and elite recruitment, that process is preferable to the alternative, which is coup d'etat, right? We've gone through all kinds of coups and all that stuff. And so, as a process for selecting our leaders, elections have done what it's supposed to do. The question is, do we also expect elections to produce leaders who will move us as a nation forward to address real problems? And that's where you have question marks, because we've elected leaders, successfully, peacefully, and I will argue that conditions on the ground have not changed for the average Ghanaian. Marginally, the economy has grown, a middle class has emerged in Ghana. Civil society is thriving, and those are all good. I lived in Ghana at a time when you couldn't hold a program like this, where you didn't have the right to free speech, where government had a monopoly over newspapers and media, and people were human rights violations all over the place. Those days are gone. So we've made some progress, but we haven't gone as far as we should go to make the lives of our people better.
Can you explain that part? Can you explain that part for us?
Well, so it always comes down to the economy. And so Ghana has actually had a remarkable growth. If you compare GDP per capita today to GDP per capita 1990, we've made progress, but it's not enough. A lot of our people are still very poor. A lot of our young people are unemployed, and we haven't made enough progress. We have to find a solution to the poverty problem. And so as long as most of your people are still languishing in poverty, the polka system has not produced sustainable and visible rewards. And then, of course, the idea of a democracy, which has devolved into a duopoly between two polka parties who are not really competing amongst themselves to change things. They just alternate in power. And they've just become, as I say, like, clouds that bring no rain. They win elections, they have their 8 years, and then they leave, and another group of elites take over, and they're not real. There's no sense of urgency to solve problems for people. But I don't want us to lose sight on the fact that even getting elections instituted as the preferred means of turning over elites, it's an achievement, because we've come from a time when that was not even guaranteed. When leaders got into power, and the only way you could get them out was through a coup d'etat. So having elections is a good beginning, but those elections then have to produce real solutions for our people, and we're not there yet, because we have elites who are in power. They win power for themselves, and they get rich, and they don't really have an agenda to develop the country and to really move us forward. We need to make giant steps. These kinds of incremental changes in the margins, commissioning a runabout here, commissioning a building here, it doesn't change things. People are suffering in the country, and you got to actually sit down and ask serious questions. How can we help the majority of our people? Now, how can I help my family? How can I help the people that voted for me in my hometown? How can I win the next election? And it appears that's what our elites are about. But still, don't throw the baby out of the bathwater. Let's keep the electoral system going. Let's make changes, radical changes, but don't abandon the system, because what we replace it will probably be worse than what we have now.
So are you making the argument that the people have not used election to discipline politicians to do the things that they are supposed to do? Is that your argument?
Yes, but what are the people supposed to do? The people, so in the electoral politics, the only tool that you have as a voter is to vote people out, right? Is to vote people out. And our people have done that. They've, changed governments after every 8 years. Maybe it's not enough. Maybe Ghana needs to think about other ways of holding politicians accountable. For example, do we have impeachment procedures? Do we have recall procedures that will allow people to directly involve themselves in the process? We don't have those institutions, so people wait 4 years and they vote somebody out. But I think that something is also happening in Ghana that you and I need to talk about. So Ghanaian electorate, the electorate has decided that the only time they can hold politicians accountable is when they come around looking for their votes. And if you go through the political retail system, you see people extracting resources at that point from the politicians. So people say, well, the politicians are buying votes. Yes, people are selling their votes because it's the only time they get something from these politicians. And also, MPs do a lot of retail politics in their constituencies where MPs become, I have a couple of MP friends and they tell me this. People go up to them because the local government system doesn't work. The MPs are the ones who are in the community. They are the front line of defense. They are the people that are most accessible to these hungry constituents. And people show up at the MPs' homes and they ask for things. So it's become a patronage system. So our electoral politics has rolled into our system of patronage, where if you're an MP, you are expected to provide all kinds of personal benefits to people. People are coming to you asking for school fees, asking for jobs, asking for money to pay for their mother's funeral, all those things. And that's not the duty of the MP. The MP's job is supposed to sit in parliament and pass laws that help the country. But because there's so little opportunities in the system, and sometimes they themselves also overpromise when they are looking for power. They say, vote for me and I'll help you and I'll do this and I'm a rich man. And they are part of this big man thing that you have in Ghana politics. As people show up to them and they ask for things, and many of those MPs cannot continue financing that largesse without being corrupt. And so that is part of our polka culture. But as long as people are poor, you're always going to have vulnerable people that can be taken advantage of. And you're always going to have unscrupulous people who seek power for personal gain. And they promise things down there. But I think that our people, the only tool that they have is to vote these politicians out. And they use it. People vote, incumbents out all the time. And that's all they can do. There is no other way. Now we've seen protests in the streets, but not in rural areas. And every now and then you see people saying, if you don't come and pave our road, we won't vote for you. If you don't give us water, we won't vote for you. But it's not clear whether the politicians really care about that. That kind of, I don't think they get that message. Once they get elected, at least they are guaranteed 4 years within which they are insulated from any kind of local pressure. There is no recall mechanism. There is no way for people to remove them once they're there. And most of them, they just hang out in Accra. Nobody really knows what they do. System is chaotic, it's shrouded in secrecy, and it's not really clear whether Parliament has enough influence over our imperial president, who, by their constitution, essentially is the one person ruling the state, because you have a Supreme Court that is ineffective because the Constitution allows the president to appoint as many judges as he wants. The Constitution also allows the president to essentially bribe Parliament by nominating ministers from Parliament. And so the president dangles appointments and all those things, and the Parliament is not really going to hold him accountable. So we end up with an executive presidency. And so if you don't get a good president, then you are out of luck. And we have to go back to revising the Constitution if there's interest in that. It's part of the solutions, but you got to keep the process going. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You got to keep the process, because if you have a military government, none of that will happen.
Sure. Thank you very much for your submission. And let's go to you, Alex, right? Alex, you have had so much experience, right, witnessing elections in several African countries in terms of peacekeeping. You've seen what happened, what was supposed to happen in South Sudan, right? You've seen what happened. We're talking about Jubaland, right? In your own experience, right? What makes Ghana elections so unique from the other country that you have experienced so far?
Okay, thank you very much. I think Ghana is old enough and we have had several elections. So one, there's a lot to learn from, though it's not perfect. And then again, I think that compared to, of course, the countries you mentioned, most of them are coming out of war. So systems are weak. And in most of those environments, without the UN, elections become sometimes impossible. So Ghana, you know, of course, we've had some stability all these years, for so many years. We've had several elections. After each of them, we learn our mistakes. You have systems that are not perfect, but work, because there's always you have the election task force at the national level, you have the regional level. I mean, it goes that's to the basic level. So if you compare, it's even difficult to compare, because in South Sudan, you know, since their first election that brought Salva Kiir, they've not had any credible election to say that, okay, the first one didn't go well, so let's learn from the first one. And then sometimes to the character of the country, the Ghanaian, yes, we've not seen it before, but I don't think we are ready to go out either to the bush or to the street and start killing ourselves. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but we don't have that resilience to sustain any long-term violence or yes. So I think these are some of the reasons why our elections, and of course, because we are still growing. And if you look at the pressure that was brought on the EC from especially the NDC side on issues with the voter transfer and all that, at least some things were done. So that form of engagement is there. So it has also contributed to making our elections somehow different from these other countries. And at least our laws work. We've been able to go to court to contest elections. And in some countries, you cannot even think about it. So I think these are some of the few things that make our election different.
All right, so let me come to Dr. Mike. You said something very interesting, right? Now, if you observe our electoral system, basically we equate elections to democracy, right? The other elements are kind of a little bit lacking, right? The other elements of democracy are kind of, so for us, democracy is all about elections. But as Ghanaians, not all Ghanaians agree that democracy is the only way out. That's like, unlike what we have in the US, whether you are a Democrat or you are a Republican, we all agree that democracy is the way forward. But for Ghanaians, if democracy is not going the way it's supposed to go, it's still possibility could put it as an alternative, right?
Okay, go ahead. Ask your question.
Yeah. So why is it that even though we see the fruits of democracy, there are a section of the Ghanaian folk who believe that when things are not going the way it's supposed to go, right? Why don't we bring in the people in the barracks come and clear the system? Why is that the case?
So first of all, I don't know where you're getting that feeling from. Because I will point to Afrobarometer data that just came out. And Afrobarometer shows that Ghanaians overwhelmingly still like democracy. There's actually the demand for democracy is still very high in Ghana. It's the supply that is in short fall. And so the Afrobarometer survey shows that Ghanaians still want democracy. So I don't know where you're getting that from. But I concede there are some people in Ghana who probably don't think that the democratic system is worth it, and that some people are impatient. I haven't seen a demand for coups. The latest Afrobarometer data shows that respect for the military has gone up. The military is the most respected institution in Ghana now, more than and respect for politicians is in the 30s. The respect for judges is in the 30s. Respect for political parties is way down, but respect for the military is going up. And for me, that troubles me because it means that it leaves open the possibility that if people think that the system is rigged, that elections don't deliver what politicians promise, there is still a tiny bit of window for the military to come in pretending to be the saviors. And I think that if that were to happen, a lot of people, especially if as we go into these elections, the polls suggest that the NDC is probably going to win. So if the NDC, for example, doesn't win, the question that becomes: do people in the NDC trust the system, the electoral system, to produce a true verdict, or would they immediately conclude that the election has been stolen? And if that's the case, then do you encourage a coup? I haven't seen the evidence that that's how things are trending, but anything is possible. I don't think that any country in Africa is beyond a coup. A coup can always happen. But I don't. In Ghana, the data shows that the people still like democracy. Now, let me address quickly the other question, the other implied question, which is whether democracy is the only option. Okay, so democracy is certainly not the only option. But in Ghana's political history, the other options to democracy has been military governments. And military governments have not always been successful. And if you look at West Africa, all these places where we've seen coups, the problems that the military claim to have seized power to address, those problems have not disappeared. In Mali, things are getting worse. In Burkina Faso, things are getting worse. So military governments are no panacea. To quote Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. Now, having said that, democratic governments have to also deliver. The social contract is not simply I vote for you and you become president, and then 8 years later I vote for the other guy. No, you have power because we want you to solve problems. So democracies have to solve problems. Otherwise, they lose their legitimacy. But I don't think that trading a democratic government, no matter how bad it is, for a military government that you cannot remove, I don't think that that's the way you want to go. If the democratic government is bad, you vote them out. You wait and you vote them out. Because if you get rid of them and you encourage a coup, there's no telling. The last time we had a coup in Ghana, the guy that did the coup, Jerry Rawlings, stayed for 19 years. And he left, after. Look at Uganda. Yoweri Museveni has been there the whole time. Paul Kagame, takes power in the midst of the genocide. He's been ruling that country since 1994. Military governments, yes, they may solve some problems, but it's very, very hard to get rid of them. They leave when they want to leave, and sometimes when they leave, they create a bigger problem than they came in to solve. And democracy has to be defined beyond elections. Democracy also includes judicial review. It includes, solving real problems, providing a pathway out of underdevelopment. It includes protection of minority rights. It includes a whole bunch of other things. And so if we define it broadly, then it requires all of us as citizens to participate into turning the promise of democracy into reality. We cannot just be people sitting on the sidelines waiting for the governments to deliver, because politicians don't do good on a morality basis. You have to be on them. You have to keep checking them. You have to keep making demands on them. And then you also have to do your part. A lot of people in Ghana don't do their parts. People don't even pay taxes in Ghana, but they expect governments to deliver services. So that's part of it. But I will never trade a democratic government for a military government because you never know what you're going to get with those.
Sure. Okay, let me come to you, Alex. Right. So initially, Dr. Miriam made the argument that elections is more or less like a transactional, right? I'm going to vote for you. You have to get something. I have to get something in return. Isn't that a fundamental problem? That people know that next 4 years, right, the politicians are going to come, and that's the only way that they are going to get something in return. Isn't that itself, right, an indictment on the kind of election that we have in Ghana? Alex.
Okay, so I think we have to put it in the perspective. I think because of the way we have brought up Ghanaians, the way we have managed them, like doctor said it, that's people go to MPs, they ask for this, they ask for that, they ask for that. If after voting the MP into power, okay, you keep pestering him or her with demands for the 4 years, he thinks that after 4 years, it is your turn to pay back to him or her. So I think that it's not supposed to be so. We're not supposed to vote people into power for them to take care of us as individuals. They are supposed to be in power, go to places like parliament, sit down, and think for the general good of all of us. So that at the end of the year, at the end of the 4 years or the term, the whole general good or that number of people will say, okay, we think that for the 4 years, there has been some improvement in our lives, not as individuals. But as long as people get power and they control resources, okay? People get power, they commit criminal offenses and they go scot-free. People get power and they're able to intimidate their colleagues with it. They become rich, they're able to help their families, friends, classmates. Their status change in short time. They're able to own certain state-owned assets. If I can do all this with power, then there are very good reasons for me to fight, for want of a better word, die for it, get it, and be able to use it against my opponent. So as long as we have made a Ghanaian think this way, feel this way, see it this way, that is how it's going to be for a long time to come.
All right, so let me come back to you, right, Dr. Nyama. We all know that what elections in Ghana is not only about disciplining politicians. It also involves control of resources, right? And we know that politicians control the resources, right? So the people also feel that they also have a stake in those resources which they have for years. The only way I'm going to have a share of the cake is when it's time for me to vote. That transaction will keep going in. That status quo will keep perpetuating. The sense that for the 4 years the politician is gone, he's enjoying all the resources with his family. So when comes election time, I have to get my pound of flesh for the politician. Why is that not fair?
So elections everywhere is transactional. Okay, so I voted for, Kamala Harris because I expect her to do things that I want. So in exchange for my vote, that's how the social contract works. In exchange for my vote, she does certain things for me. But it's not personal in Ghana because of, I think, our polka culture. Because remember, this politics happens within a polka culture. So our polka culture, which is clientelism, neo-patrimonialism, which is if you are a big man, you take care of people. Every big man, people, they'll come to you. If you are in Ghana now, your nephews and their friends, they will all come to you. It's part of that patronage system. And so on top of that system, we've grafted this democracy. The other aspect of our polka culture is this reverence for elected leaders. So look at even the words that we use in our local parlance to describe the president. Omampeni is kind of the father of the nation. Yesterday, I was reading the statement that Kufuor issued on Baumia, for example. He's calling, he referred to Baumia as my child. So we have this patron, client networks where it's big men and small boys, and which is really weird because in the social contract, the people are actually the big men. The elected governments work for us. So we are the people, the citizens are supposed to be the primaries, and the government tends to be agent. But in Ghana, it's we flipped it out because of our culture. So there's too much reverence for the leader, and we expect the leader to treat us, the citizens, as the children. So a father takes care of his children. And so people go up to him and say, give me this and give me that and give me this. And in order for him to be able to, the MP to be able to deliver all those things, they also think that, well, I have to engage in corrupt practices. And so, it's all built in. And then we also tend to excuse people who are corrupt as long as they belong to our, group. If they are part of our patronage networks, then the only crime is when you don't redistribute what you steal. So we make excuses for people, politicians that go into power and they become rich. We know that the only reason they are rich is because they are corrupt, but they become inconsolable and all that stuff in our community as long as they're helping us. But at this basic level, election is always about transaction. You give somebody your vote and they're supposed to do things for not for you personally but for your nation. But for us, it gets distilled down to what can this person do for me personally. And we should also bring in chiefs, because chiefs, if you know, the 1900 Constitution says that they don't have an active role in politics. They become brokers in this transaction that happens, where the chief, becomes the conduit through which things, messages are sent, and the chiefs host the politician, and they do their best and they do all kinds of stuff, and some monies, change hands and all this is so. And then, of course, if there are resources in the particular area, there's two types of demand. Sometimes people want the MP to make sure that enough of the resources in that local area stays in that area. And sometimes they want to make sure that people who are not from the area don't have access to it. But a lot of our natural resources belong to the state and they are centrally redistributed. And so there are a lot of people in Ghana who lives in areas where there are no natural resources, and they rely on their MP and the government to redistribute resources to that area. And they're going to pick the MP that has the ability to do that, the networking and the skills to be able to do that. And a lot of those things are not based on merit. They're based on transactions and connections and who knows whom and who has access to the presidency, who invested enough money in the president's election fund, because that's how you get access in Ghana. Are you going to get named a minister? If you don't get named a minister, you don't get in, you don't have access to the resources. And are you going to be on the crucial board? And the way you get that notice is not how good you are, it's whether you were able to make enough of an investment to help the party win the elections. That's why we end up with things like Galamsey. Galamsey happens in Ghana because the people, the entrepreneurs engaged in Galamsey end up funding political parties, and they end up funding people who run for elections. And so once you get elected, you're not going to bite off the hand that fed you, the people that helped you win the elections. And even if you know they're doing something that's illegal, it's very hard to go after people who have poured money into your campaign. And so that's our system. That's the system that we have. So you cannot just, pick and choose. We have to rethink how our polka culture is. And because the polka culture by default favors polka corruption, we need strong institutions that will raise the cost of polka misbehavior for the politicians. Because politicians, as I said, don't do good on a morality basis. And so when the polka culture is corruption tolerant, you need institutions that would actually crack down on misbehavior. This is the only way you're going to get any kind of change.
All right, thank you. Martin just joined. Let me go to Martin, right? Now, since 1992 up to now, the NDC have been in power for 16 years, the NPP have been in power for 15 years, where the people go elect, elections are held, and elections are announced. But we know that there are backroom deals, right? After elections, there are backroom deals for political party, presidential candidates to either accept elections. Sometimes we have a situation where Asante has called the two major political parties and negotiated. Why is it that when the people have to speak and vote, there are backroom negotiations and deals, which is more or less making election like a revolving door? Okay, you stay in power for 8 years, then when you are gone, then we also bring this person to come in and stay in power for 8 years. So it is not about the will of the people. It's more or less about like a negotiated settlement between the top political elites. What do you think about that, Martin?
Okay, yeah. So, Dr. Quinn, yes, you're up. But if you watch other democracies, it happens that, you see, democracy is not a one-day event. The people evolve. So what you find is that, yes, it's true that what caused this winner takes all encourages a lot of tension, right? And so that's how come a party that loses is often not willing to go, because when it goes out of power, it doesn't have all the resources, right? Because it's winner takes all. But my key point is that you're saying, why does it keep happening this way? It doesn't. Here we are growing. Is that not the point?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. And okay, so my point is that, at least from the little I've seen about Western democracies, at least I can talk about democracy as time goes by, and so it also influences the democracy. You heard what Professor just said, that we have a culture of corruption, okay? A culture of corruption. So when you have such a culture of corruption, it affects the way the democracy is practiced. So what I see is that our system will improve when people get jobs and more people can earn their own income independently. So if they can earn their own income independently, these people are going to be able to stand up to the political party that, listen, we will not take this from you. But right now, because unemployment is a huge problem, the political parties have a lot of influence because they control a lot of jobs. When a party is in power, that party controls a lot of resources. And so it's able to control a lot of jobs, right? And so people often don't want to stand up to the party, because if a party is in power and you stand up to it, you are not going to get good jobs. Then it means that you want to stay out of the government sphere. So you see that public servants don't usually criticize government. Public servants don't usually take on the government because you jeopardize your job. So to the extent that there are no jobs here, then it's the political parties that wield a lot of power. And you know, the first human instinct is self-preservation. So a man would want to keep his job and be able to take care of his family. So such a man is not going to be standing up to the party in government that, I'm talking about public servant. Oh, you are corrupt. You are doing this. You are interfering in my jobs. No. So that is how come that the parties have a lot of power. And so every 8 years, we just, recycle. From NDC, we go to MPP. From MPP, we come back to NDC. But this cycle is going to break. It's going to break when the economy picks up and people are able, the private sector is able to create a lot of jobs. And so you are going to have a lot of people who are independent-minded. Right now, the middle class in Ghana is small. And this middle class, a huge chunk of them, and also the elite, depend on government, okay, for their jobs and for contracts. That's how come I keep making the point, you wouldn't want to stand up to the government, because you do that, you're jeopardizing your job. And the civil society space is very small. I'm telling you that the space is very small, very few civil society, actors. There are few. If you look at Ghana, by the time you mention CDD, IDEC, Imani, then you're now looking around, trying to look for which other ones. There are other ones, but they are not as vocal and they are not many. So the other problem is that Ghana's civil society space is small. Yeah, now I'm remembering the media, Foundation for West Africa, etc. But trust me, with a small civil society space like that, and please, when I say they're small, I'm not talking about their lack of independence. No, the few that are operating can be independent if they want to be, right? But I'm saying that we don't have enough. The numbers are low. So these few ones that are doing well are not sufficient to catapult the kind of change that we need. We need more people to talk. We don't have enough people talking apart from the political parties. So if you don't have enough civil society groups to be able to push the parties to change, then you won't have much change in the political parties.
Sure. All right. So let me come to you, Alex. Right. Now, you remember the NDC said what? This time they are not elections. If there's going to be any election dispute, they are not going to go to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is out. For them, they are going to deal with the elections at a polling booth, which they describe as booth for booth. Isn't that in itself, right, dangerous? That people see election to be a do and die situation, given your experience in terms of what you have seen in other countries.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for boot, we have heard it for so many times. Okay, it's not a good sign because I think it doesn't communicate that willingness to accept whatever will happen or follow this peace pact or whatever we have signed. Now, the question is, what happens at the police station? And what is the nature of the boot for boot going to be? Does it mean they are going to fight the security that will be deployed? Or they are going to take over the security of the polling stations? Several things can happen. Because the character of the police station is sometimes you have maybe 2 or 3 policemen or soldiers, fire service or immigration. And if it is this place that the boot for boot is going to take place, then we are going to see something that we will all not be happy about. If you want to go back to refer to Ablekuma and Tejima and all those places, I don't think that is what we should ask for. Because elections are elections. People are going to win, people are going to lose. But if for now, the message we have put out is that, look, we are not going to go to any Supreme Court, we are going to face whoever will come boot for boot, then I wish the party youth organizers were here to have addressed this issue. Then whatever is likely to happen is not going to be good for all of us. That is what I think I can say about that.
All right. So, Dr. Noma, you had the final word on this on this issue, right? So you hear the people in government also say, "Oh, we are not going to hand over power to government to the other party, rain or shine. They are going to use all sort of means." And you can see all this sort of shenanigans going on with the election management board in terms of some of the things that you stated from the beginning, right? Isn't these signs that election as the sole yardstick for information democracy in Ghana is problematic?
But it's not a sole yardstick. And again, the ideas, the point is well taken. So Ghana's institutions are weak, they are new. But look at this country, look at the United States. They've been holding elections for over 200 years. And if Donald Trump had lost this election, you and I will probably be hiding under some tree right now because he wouldn't have accepted the results. So it's not always about the system, it's also about the character of the people involved, the candidates. And so if this election in Ghana goes the way we think it's going to go, and let's say one of the losing candidate comes out and says, I accept it, I accept the results. I've called look at Kamala Harris. I've called Donald Trump and congratulated him. Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton won 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. She called and congratulated him. Donald Trump lost by 7 million. He refused to accept the results. Even up to now, he's still insisting that he didn't lose that result. So it comes down to the character of the candidate. If the loser of the elections in Ghana, steps up and provides leadership, it's very easy to appear to be a leader when you win. But the moment of leadership is greater when you lose. Can you step up and tell your followers that, listen, we fought a good fight. We didn't win this election, but there will be other elections. Let's wish the winner well. Let's all go home. We are all citizens. We have a new president. We have a new government. Let's do our job as citizens to support that government. No violence. If that tone comes from the leadership, we shouldn't have any problem because this election, one person is going to win, one person is going to lose, right? One party is going to win, one party is going to lose. So it's the incumbent has to make sure that there's a transfer of power. And I think that the current president has said that he will hand over power.
You making the argument that one party has to accept, given the behavior of the electoral commission, right? In terms of what we are experiencing, how do you expect the NDC, when they lose, to accept that the elections were free and fair? Given what
I don't think the NDC expects to lose. So what the Electoral Commission does is also important. Is there confidence in the Electoral Commission? No. The Electoral Commission, again, going back to Afrobarometer data that just came out, people don't trust the Electoral Commission. But the Electoral Commission is not the only one that's running elections in Ghana. They are the pivotal agents. But there's a whole bunch of other people. There's an entire coalition. There's a coalition of domestic election observers who are doing parallel voter tabulation. There's the Electoral Security Task Force. Dampari is out there. They have early warning. They have a toll-free number where people can call and report all kinds of stuff. You have the National Peace Council, regional. There's so many things happening. The elections is not something that just the Electoral Commission does. The Electoral Commission runs the elections, but in terms of electoral security, everybody has a role. Civil society groups have a role. Ordinary citizens have a role. The political parties have a role. Their party agents are there. So there's a whole bunch of things that has to go wrong for the Electoral Commission to steal the elections. Now, I don't think that that's going to happen. But again, as I said, it always comes down to the margin. So if there's a huge win for one party, there's nothing the Electoral Commission can do. But if it's a narrow win, then you got to get into controversy. And at that point, I expect civil society leaders, I expect chiefs, I expect the Council of State, I expect the current president, I expect former presidents to step up and say, listen, elections is not the end all be all for our nation. There's going to be other elections. Think about all the people that lost elections in Ghana and still became president. Mills ran for president 3 times before he won. Akufo-Addo himself ran for president 3 times before he won. And so if you lose, let's say Bawumia, and I'm not saying that he's going to lose this election, but if Bawumia loses this election, he's still a young man. He can run again. And so don't burn the house down simply because you lost. And I would expect him to show leadership by telling his people, let's concede peacefully, let's be good citizens, and let's wish the elected president well. After all, there will be another election. And it's always easier when you win. It's a lot harder when you lose. And as I said, if Trump had lost this election, he would still be contesting it. And this country will be in turmoil. But because, the person that lost the election is a good person and takes citizenship, seriously, her duty was to call and congratulate a man that she doesn't agree with. And that is the test. That's what I'm expecting Ghanaian citizens to demand of their leaders. If you lose the election, don't go out in the street and tell people to go and bend down anything. We are tired of that kind of stuff.
All right. So you're talking about leadership. We've seen in the past where some of the candidates did not congratulate the leading party. But let's move on to the other narrative. The narrative is violence, right? So, Alex, I did tell you the narrative. So my question to you, as a security expert with decades of military experiences in various political spaces in several African countries, on UN African peacekeeping missions in countries such as South Sudan, Mali, DR Congo, and currently in Mogadishu, witnessing elections and factors that contribute to electoral violence. What are the main drivers of electoral violence in Ghana, per se, specifically? What are the main drivers of what? Electoral violence in Ghana? I would like you to make a distinction between what? High intensity and low intensity violence. What are the main drivers of what? Electoral violence in Ghana?
Okay, so thank you very much. I don't know whether in your school you ever contested the position of SRC president or something, but we know that no one goes an election to lose, and especially an election like what we are going to have, it is going to be very difficult to lose from the people who are in the forefront, from the presidential candidate to parliamentary candidates. It is not going to be easy to lose. That is one. It is not easy to lose an election. So when I lose and there's something that I can temporarily do to more or less bring my spirits down, I'll go for it. If it means destroying something or proving that, yes, I have lost, but I'm doing this to more or less compensate my loss. So losing election is tough. And that is why we can have electoral violence. Again, I think we said it earlier that we have commercialized a lot of things around our democracy. We are going to have electoral violence because our foot soldiers, the masses, are available and ready to do all the bad and nasty things we don't expect to happen. Why? Because they are the most vulnerable. Most of them are unemployed. Most of them are not educated. So even when there's the will to help them, to employ them, it becomes highly difficult to give them that opportunity they feel they've worked hard for. Now, the issue of low intensity and high intensity violence, when the political structure, the political leadership sit down, orchestrate the violence, and it is at a higher scale, as we saw in the Kenya some years ago, then we are looking at it from the high intensity form of electoral violence. On the other hand, if certain individuals, I mean, party soldiers on their own, without any higher level direction, sit down, plan to also go out, attacking people, intimidating people, destroying properties, it's not at a higher scale, then we are looking at low intensity electoral violence. And I think over the years, people have been nicely rewarded. So the motivation is there, it's very high. Look, we did it last 2 years, last 3 years, the last 8 years. So if we are able to mobilize and help these candidates win, we may even be rewarded better than before. So the motivation is also very high, and the reward comes in the form of contract or jobs, or as we have seen over the years, people taking over lorry stations, public toilets. So, and these are the people who go chasing these state properties. And it has worked in some places along in the way of chasing these things. They've destroyed properties. They've even harmed people. Nothing happened to them. So that sense of we can do anything and go scot-free, also, it's also promoting this electoral violence. And interestingly, sometimes elections within the party, we see these things. That is what makes it even more dangerous. Intra-party elections, either presidential candidates or sometimes even community chair people. I mean, as basic as you can think about, people go attacking people, intimidating people, destroying properties. And then sometimes people go out deliberately to recruit these guys. Yes.
No, okay.
Sometimes they're the food.
Alex, let me follow up with something, right? Prior to elections, right, the Electoral Commission, working with the Ghana Police Service and the Army, right, identify certain areas which they consider to be hot spots, that they are likely to be what? Violence in those areas, right? So those areas have been identified, security personnel are sent over there, but yet still, the violence still goes on. So what happens? We identify and it's going to be filled with violence, and still the violence goes on. What explains that?
Okay. Now, you can identify your hotspots, map out with all your plans. The issue is how many policemen or soldiers can they be available or can be available for us to make sure that even this identified hotspot, we have so many of them to be able to bring situations under control. At some point, it becomes extremely difficult to achieve. You know, we have thousands of police stations. How many policemen do we have? And you cannot, some places, soldiers can only come in or reinforce when this crisis starts because they cannot physically be at the police station when we are voting. So places where sometimes there are 2 or 3 soldiers or police there, or even 10 policemen are there, and still this violence occurs, is because these foot soldiers, they have that experience, they've done these things over the years, and know that, hey, as you know, the soldiers cry, they can't be that many. So if we have those numbers, and they know that the soldier cannot just start firing or shooting at them, the same way the police cannot just start shooting at them. So these are some of the things they exploit. And that's why in places where we still have police or soldiers there, the violence still okay.
But let me go to Martin, right? Martin, if you observe, right, some of these political parties in their strongholds, right, still from level, those areas, you don't see violence happening so much, right, in certain constituencies. Because those constituencies are either deeply MPP or deeply NDC, right? So in that situation, police going there, they know very well that if there's some sort of rigging going on and they want to make sure things are done right, people are going to overwhelm them compared to areas which is more or less like Ablekuma Center, which can go NDC or go MPP. But when it is a political stronghold, right, the police and the army know that in those areas, in the avoid any kind of rigging, right, they won't be overpowered by the people over there. Do you agree to that? Most of the violence happens in areas, not in strongholds.
Oh, okay. I see. To an extent, yes. And that's why you've rightly explained. Violence happens when you don't have one group totally dominating a constituency or an area, right? So it means that that particular enclave or constituency is up for grabs. And so generally, both parties, talking about the 2 bigger parties, try to lay claim to the territory. But sometimes, and so we can name one example that happened in Nima. Mamobi, as part of the Ayawaso, I think that's part of Ayawaso Central, right? Yes. So you see that there was like a turf war. You find the NDC youth and then the MPP youth. They were in a violent confrontation about 2 months ago because each was trying to lay claim. But let's say if you take Dom Kwabenya is hugely MPP. So the MPP has control. So if any opposing youth wants to come and do anything there, they will be well advised not to do it because they will be overpowered, because that's a hugely blue constituency. In similar fashion, if a constituency is hugely green, that's NDC, yes, it means that NDC will have so many forces, so many actors who can quell such violence easily. All right. Yes, so largely I agree with you on that basis. But to every rule, you'll find an exception where an area can be the stronghold of a certain political party, but sometimes you can find violence breaking, what do you call it, out there, right? Yes. So these things, by and large, you are right, but you also find outliers. That's why I say to every rule, there is an exception. I'm trying to find, in times past, you remember the Ayawasu West Wagon constituency.
Right.
Now, Ayawasu West Wagon is a constituency that has largely belonged to the NPP since Ken Jirasa won in the 90s. From that time, it's been an NPP seat. You see that the NPP has won election after election. Yet, you saw the violence that came up there when we went for the by-election. You say, so sometimes a constituency can largely belong to one political party, but you can still find members of an opposing party coming to lay claim to it. So in that context, the Ayawaso West Wogon constituency is an example. That's what happened in the by-election last time, leading to the setting up of the Commission of Inquiry and the indictment of the national security in the participation in the election in manners that was wrong. The setting up of...
We'll come to that when we get to our next narrative, which we directed to. But let me go to Dr. Nuyama, right? Now, we know that there are certain remote areas very, very far away from the cities, which are very, very difficult to access, right? It could be a stronghold of a political party, and they could use some sort of what? Misinformation. Because the places are very far away, right? You have party boys who go into use some sort of misinformation to get people of the political party to stay away from the election. We've seen that situation, right? Now, you can have a situation where the police or the army will be sent in there to those areas, and yet still they can't do anything about the misinformation. Because if they try to do something, they will be overpowered by the political party because these areas are very remote. You can talk about areas in the northern region, talk about for instance, where there's no access, internet and things like that. So misinformation in those areas works, right? Other opposing parties are not able because if they engage in any kind of it would going to lead to violence. So
what's your question?
I'm asking that. How do we deal with situations like that?
Okay, so it's a capacity question. If you have a strong police presence, they can do something. It depends on how many police people you have in that area. And if you don't have enough police people, then it's not going to matter. And we also assuming that the police themselves are also not biased. Chances are, if the police have been operating in that particular the scenario that you painted in a remote area, the police are part of the community, and they have to live there after the election. So they're probably not going to crack down on violators. But I take Martin's point. Chances are, if it's a heavily NDC area, you're not going to have MPP troublemakers. If it's a heavily MPP area, you're not going to have NDC troublemakers. But in the primary, you may have two candidates from the same party fighting amongst themselves, and then they can mobilize people to commit violent acts. But in terms of misinformation is not just something that happens in the remote areas. It also happens in urban areas as well, because there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, misinformation that's spread, through WhatsApp and all of those kinds of stuff. And there's a new report that's out on artificial intelligence and misinformation in Ghana. If you take a look at that, you'll see all kinds of stuff. That can also be an urban problem. But generally speaking, if you don't have the security capacity to manage problems, those problems are going to escalate. And so if we don't have enough, we have not enough security capacity in Ghana. We have too few police officers. They are poorly paid. They are poorly trained in some of these rural areas. The police cannot maintain public order. They don't even have armories that they can safely keep weapons in. I used to work for Electoral Commission, not Electoral Commission, the Exams Council a long time ago. Exams Council, they keep their exam papers in local armories. If you go and see some of those armories, it's laughable. Any group of thugs can simply walk into the police station and grab all kinds of stuff. These are the places where we're going to store ballot papers. There is not enough security over there. And the police will not go into a situation where they can easily be overrun by radical youth, and some of whom are armed, and they're not going to take that risk, assuming that they themselves are not compromised. And it's very easy for police people who are poorly paid and poorly trained to be compromised when they live in remote areas, and they need the support of the community to survive. And so it's just a question of we don't have the management capacity, and this is where chiefs can play a role. Chiefs can, in a lot of places they have greater legitimacy than the government agents over there, and so chiefs can play this kind of role. That's why I'm telling that managing and preventing electoral violence is not something that you leave to the Electoral Commission alone. We need citizens on the ground to play a role. So in a case like that, you're going to probably rely on the chief to hold people back rather than the police going out there. They are poorly equipped. And so when there's a riot, what do? They start shooting live bullets instead of, warning shots or rubber bullets. They don't have those things. They don't have the crowd control equipment. They don't have, all the stuff that in advanced democracies you would have. They don't have those things. And so next thing you know, they kill somebody and all hell breaks loose.
Right. Thank you very much. Alex, let me come back to you. You've shared with me some of your experiences in remote areas, right? Now, how recently there was some sort of misinformation coming from Wontumi TV, right? Where they were talking about the elections are on the 7th, you are supposed to vote for John Awemia, and the remaining days you have to vote for other candidates. How would that contribute to election violence in deep rural areas where people are not so much informed about what is really going on?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the last part.
You have shared with me some of your experiences in remote areas.
It appears you are a bit far from your mic.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah. So what I'm asking is that, can you give us case studies in terms of how misinformation has contributed to violence in remote areas, taking into consideration what's really recently happened on Wontumi TV?
Okay. Thank you very much. I think now the situation is relatively better because we have TV stations in so many places. You have internet connectivity in so many places. But in the past, it was extremely difficult to widen this divide because in the village, people, prior to the election, people are able to go to specific communities, either warn them that, hey, the election is not even the day you think it is, so don't come out on that day. Or we go to our opponent's stronghold and warn them that if they come out to vote, A, B, C, D will happen to them. Or people are able to buy voter ID card, all those things happen. I don't think it is completely impossible now to happen. It is possible that it can happen, but what I also know that even within parties, they have become aware of all the things they do to each other. So the education and awareness among themselves is a bit higher now. They know sometimes they use it in the past and their opponents have advanced in that same way. So awareness among the parties is relatively higher now. So I don't think those things can work. And especially if they know those are the areas they've always been winning, they will put in measures to, at least to a large extent, stop those misinformation or intimidation or anything that may result in the other party not having the advantage they've always had.
Okay, so it seems like both parties, both the NDC and NPP, they know each other, so they know they've been playing on each other.
Yes.
All right, so let's end it for one day, because the national organizers are not here. I don't want us to look at the low intensity violence. I want us to move to the high intensity violence. Go to Martin, right? So let me read something for you, Martin, carefully. All right? Part of the Short report, which was set up to make full inquiry into the circumstances and establish the facts leading to the event of an associated electoral violence of a by-election at Ayawaso West Gogo, something that you just said, which witnessed the presence of masked, heavily built and hooded armed men. Part of the report reads, in the minimum, the national security apparatus has been operated as a political appendage of succeeding governments in Ghana and has been treated as such. Their operational officers have been changed with each change of government, and their closeness with the politics of Ghana can hardly be denied. That the national security establishment is not a regular police force, nor are they part of the regular army, is accordingly clear. In this regard, the Commission knows that the tendency to give the operatives of the national security apparatus the appearance of police powers is illegal. Furthermore, the Commission denounces a tendency to put civilians in police or military uniforms to conduct offensive operations called some illegal. So what you were talking about, my question to you, what was the intended legal purpose of the Vigilante and Other Offenses Act? And how has the purpose of the act led to curbing the recruitment of vigilante groups into the regular police force and the regular army to form part of the national security apparatus?
What was the intended legal
purpose of the Vigilante and
Prof.
Other Offenses Act?
Hello? Prof, I lost you a bit. What was the intended legal? Then I lost the rest of the words.
Purpose of the Vigilante and Other Offenses Act. And how is the passage of the act?
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, so
go ahead. Okay, let's deal with that first.
Okay.
Let's look at the legal purpose of the Vigilante and Other Offenses Act first. Then we'll go to the other aspect.
Okay.
What was the purpose of it?
Yeah, so the purpose of it was to, one, disband all the vigilante groups. Yes, disband them, okay? And and these groups, some of them were part of political parties. I'm sure those days you would hear Azoka boys, you hear Kandahar boys, you hear Invisible Forces, and so on and so forth. Yes, if in the act, 27 of them were named and disbanded, if you go to Regulation 2. So we found that these vigilantes were operating even within political parties, and that's how I've named some. So you hear some of them were within the MPP, others were within the NDC. You remember how the Invisible Forces entered the court in Kumasi and freed one of their own and put the judge under threat, etc., right? So the purpose was to disband these groups, then provide for, and also land guards, to prescribe the activities of land guards, because the land guards also do vigilante activities, right? Because the police are to provide law and order by Article 200 of our Constitution. So we don't need vigilantes providing extra security. So these are the primary aims, and also to punish people who defy the law. So the law is made provision for prosecution and punishment of persons who still engage in vigilante activities, and they are stiff from 10 years to 15 years. If you participate in vigilante activities, or you promote, or a person forms or organizes a vigilante group. Yes, so these are the state punishments that have also been provided for under the law. Now, yes, that is law. And you heard Professor Nuyama, and then I think Alex also made a point. The law is one thing, implementation is another. So you may have all the beautiful laws, but implementation can be a challenge. In the case of the Vigilante Act, I think by and large, it's been properly implemented because these groups, as I mentioned, 27 of them stated in Schedule 2 have been disbanded. And so now you don't openly hear persons saying anybody saying he's part of Invincible Forces or Azoka Boys, etc. You don't hear that openly, except that we know that human beings as we are, secretly or quietly, you still have these persons who would band together to provide security for their parties. Yeah, okay. So at least openly, no, they don't exist. But underground, I have no doubt that they still exist.
Yeah, let me follow up with something, right? I'm asking that how has the passing of this act, right, contributed to curbing the recruitment of these vigilante groups into the police force and the army force, just like what we saw with the SWAT team that went to Iowa. Because the political parties are very, very smart. They don't want them to exist. They have recruited them into the police and the army, one part of the SWAT. How has the law been able to deal with that?
Yeah, so the law does not expressly deal with recruitment, that these persons will be recruited into the various police, the police service or the military. No, the law doesn't make that provision for them. It's not like in Nigeria, some time ago with their vigilantes, they had to make provision for some of them to be recruited into the army, etc. In Nigeria, it's happened. But here, our Vigilante Act didn't expressly give these vigilantes that transition, that they should be transitioned into the police service or the army, not expressly. But we know that usually these persons are party boys. So don't be surprised to find that some of them have been recruited into the police service and the army. It goes. That's the way, we operate a patronage system. These men provided security for their party. So for this party that's in power, that's the MPP, yes, there's some of the vigilante members will definitely find their way into the security forces because that is the way the system works. And look, it didn't start with this government. It's always been that when a political party wins power, often the vigilantes who helped to provide security at the election, polling stations, etc., lots of them are engaged, lots of them are recruited into the army, the police, national security. That's the way it's been working. So we cannot say the law has curbed the recruitment of vigilantes into the police or the army, etc. No, because that's not the purpose of the law. And so for that practice of recruiting party foot soldiers who provide security, who we call vigilante, it will continue to happen in the security services. They will continue to absorb them. There's not much.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Alex. Alex, you about dealings with the police service. How pervasive is the recruitment of these party boys, right, vigilante groups, into the police and army, what they normally call us for police? How pervasive is that?
Okay. Of course, these things, like Martin said, it's like air. It can be moving in your face, but you can't see it. Okay. We know the way Ghana police recruits, Ghana military, fire service, and all that. That has not changed. They still they do open advertisements, people go through all the processes, and then they get recruited. Now, I think for a political party, for what we know over the years, the easiest way to help, into brackets, as many of their followers as they can is these institutions, because they are not demanding so much higher qualification, and many of these people either are GSS or SSS people qualify. Sometimes even where they don't qualify, certain hands are used to push some people through. Their level of pervasiveness is going to be difficult to maybe put it at 10% or 20% or 30%. But to a large extent, many of them get recruited into these institutions because it is the best window available. I think Martin said it earlier on. The country is controlled by the government. The private sector is not that big. So government more or less is the highest employer. And for a party that would tell you, hey, these guys work so hard for us, and this becomes the only option to help them. We cannot peg the percentage at any level, but it happens. It becomes the best window to recruit this party for soldier, and it is part of the causes of electoral violence in some places, because the guy knows that, hey, this is going to be my chance. If I tried for the past 4 years trying to enter police or military or fire service and it didn't work, this is the time for me to fight hard, bring my party to power. And once that happens, I think I'm assured of being a policeman or a military officer. So, yes, we cannot peg the percentage anywhere, but it happens.
All right, let me come to Dr. Neil before I come back again to Martin. Right, what are the implications? What are future implications of we recruiting, political party recruiting vigilante groups into the police or army in the name of SWAT? What are the implications long term?
Well, the implications are clear. You're always going to have vulnerabilities when it comes to managing conflict, because they themselves are conflicted, right? So if you're a foot soldier and you are in the security force and you are in an area where you're supposed to prevent election rigging, for example, you're not going to be able to do your work effectively because you are conflicted. But going back to the question that you posed earlier, and I see two things here. So there is no provisions for an effective security sector reform in Ghana. So take vigilantes, right? You say you have a law saying, okay, they are banned, but you cannot just send them home. Many of those people are engaged in vigilante activities because they don't have alternative employment opportunities. And so you don't, so anytime conflict ends, what do? We do DDR, demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration, where you train people and you give them a means to earn an honest living. So they don't go be vigilantes somewhere else, but they can go get into farming, they can get into carpentry. So you can't simply just disband them and send them home. They don't have jobs. Somebody's going to provide a job for them. So you take that, insufficient transition and you add on the corrupt recruitment that happens in Ghana into all of our security agencies. And it's not just vigilantes. A lot of people, I have a friend that got recruited into the Ghanaian Ghana police. And, I was shocked when I found out that he was a police officer because he had been convicted for participating in a gang rape of his classmate when he was in school. He went to jail. It was publicized in the Ghanaian Times, front page photograph of him as a student, one of 3 male students who raped a female classmate. He was arrested, sent to jail. Next time I hear of him, he's in the police service. How did that happen? They didn't investigate him. he probably paid a bribe to be recruited. And so you take the insufficient professionalization of our recruitment processes for the security agencies, where anybody that has money can pay somebody and get recruited into these agencies. Then you have the political parties themselves who have to find jobs for their former vigilantes, and there is no quality control process. So maybe the only thing that will ban you from being recruited is if you don't have the necessary academic qualifications. But those that do, nobody's looking at their background to say, well, you committed crimes and you did this stuff, so you are prevented from being recruited. But more importantly, if you disband vigilantes and you don't give them somewhere to go, if you don't give them skills, if you don't figure out how to help them transition into a meaningful, economically gainful, non-violent life, then you are only setting them up for failure, and they are likely to be recruited to do other vigilante. And make no mistake, these groups that he was mentioning, those groups have been disbanded, but new ones have emerged. Because once somebody's a vigilante, they don't have a job. That's why they became a vigilante to start with. They are foot soldiers. They don't have jobs. So if you disband them, and they're still available for hire. Today, there's a story that I saw where one of the people that did the ayahuasca violence has reappeared as a bodyguard to another politician because they didn't transition. So if they don't have jobs when the government says we've shut you down and you don't provide training for them, they are available for somebody else to hire them. And if they enter the police, that's the least of your concern, because in the police, they get recruited into the army, there are control mechanisms that can, where they work, they can control the things that they do. And if they engage in criminality, they will be kicked out and all those things. But the danger is that they become personal militias for another political movement or another politician, and they continue doing all kinds of criminalities, and there's no way of holding them to account.
Yeah, okay, let me come back to you, Alex, right? Dr. Newman mentioned SSRG, right? Security Sector Reform and Governance, right? Why is Ghana on a periodic basis engaging in some sort of SSRG in the security services? Are we periodic? Because SSRG should be a continuous process, right? So these vigilantes group who has been disbanded, but they find their way one way or the other into the security service, right? What sort of SSRG have we been engaging in to be able to find jobs for these people?
Okay. I think even in America, they reformed their security sector. So almost every security sector in the world goes through some form of reforms almost every time. But when you go to the conflict space where the country is coming out of conflict, it's more pronounced, well planned, with programs where certain indicators are looked at up to a point where the project or the program ends because they feel that, okay, now we can leave this country to be on their own. Yes, Ghana Police, Ghana Forces, every other institution, security institution, goes through these reforms, either through expansion of physical structures, changing of recruitment processes. In the past, nobody was selling cards for people to go online and fill forms and all that. So these things happen. However, because in most cases, they are not planned with certain objectives in mind, they don't achieve the purpose for which they are supposed to achieve. If you go to Ghana Police, they will tell you, look, we used to be like this. Now we have stopped this. We are doing this. You go to the armed forces, they will tell you, we used to be this. The same for most of the security institutions that I know. But if the focus is to weed out people we think.
Whose car is this one? It's Where's your car? It's on the other side.
If the focus is not that we feel there are criminals in Ghana Police, Ghana Military, Ghana Fire Service, and we are doing this program or projects deliberately to weed them out, I don't think that can change, because these reforms are going on. But is the focus on making sure we don't allow this party vigilante or people with criminal background to come? If that is not the focus, the reforms can go on, but it will not address these challenges.
Yeah, let me come back to you, because let me share my own personal experience with you, right? In terms of the way the national security operatives operate in Ghana. I remember one time I was going somewhere and there was this car coming my way, right, where I'm supposed to take a taxi. It was a taxi stop. And the guy ran through all the way where I was supposed to take the taxi. He got up and I confronted. He said he's from national security, right? So it's like, it is more about intimidating the citizens, right? The civilians, right? Because they don't have any proper function, right? Like I'm saying, why should I engage somebody and his first instinct is to tell me that he's from national security? Why should that be the case?
Okay. You know, yes, it's been long when we departed from military regime, we've gone through democracy, but the structure of Ghana's security architecture is still going through some process. It's not too long when we had the Ministry of National Security. So there's still a lot that must happen or will happen. Maybe some will argue that we have been too slow. But certain structures work in the past. And as you know, we are still going around, MPP will go, NDC will come, MPP will go, NDC will come. And some people think that, oh yes, when we were here, this is what we did, and it worked. So our national security architecture, and specifically national security operatives, or people we've known as national security officers, the way they behave, their character, their professionalism, and everything, is going to take some time to change. Because I think Dr. Nema mentioned it from the beginning that some of these guys end up at national security and all those places. It's going to take a long time for us, our national security people, to behave the way you expect them to be. Because, I mean, you've heard it on radio that, oh, some of our boys said they want to go to national security. For what? Because they know that some of their colleagues in the past ended up there, and they are even better than them in terms of education. So if their colleagues in the past managed to become national security staff, then they will also push for it and go there. So it's going to take some time for us to really develop and mature, for us to see national security that we all expect it to be, or national security officers, the way to behave, that professional way that we all expect them to behave.
All right, thank you. Let me come to Dr. Niyama. We also saw what happened in Ayawaso in 2020, right, with these older people who went over there. We also saw what happened in Kitchen, right, when the military went.
Ben, you fading in and out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm saying that we saw what happened in Ayawaso, right, with the SWAT team, and we saw what happened in Techima, right? Up to now, so the NDC and the MPP are making politics in terms of how many people died. Some people say 6 people died, some people 8 people died. But the military were involved, right, in the task force. In a situation like that, how do you hold the military accountable, since they were only called in by the police to assess them, right? Up to now, we've not been able to deal with that situation. The entire government structure has not taken up that issue. Are we not heading towards a dangerous direction if we are getting the army to get involved in the civilian law enforcement, and we cannot punish them or cannot hold them accountable for their actions? Are we not heading towards a dangerous direction?
We're already in a dangerous direction. You even forget to add Ashamai.
Ashama, correct, yeah.
Same kind of stuff where the military does routine law enforcement functions that should be reserved for the police because the police lack capacity. The military has been politicized. The leadership of the military has been politicized. So as long as politicians keep using them to do these kinds of stuff, it's going to be very, very hard for them to be strictly professional. And so a lot of this stuff, so politicians, here's the thing, so I don't want us to be naive. Politicians will do whatever they think they can get away with. And they will do whatever they think they need to do to hold power. It's up to us to acknowledge that and so build institutions, independent institutions that are strong enough to overrule those politicians. So if you want the military held to account, we need to figure out the United States, how do they do it? How have other countries done it? You got to have independent judicial systems, independent oversight that politicians do not control. And that's what we have not done in Ghana. We just let politicians run these things. And politicians are, they're not different from other places. Donald Trump will do the same thing if he had complete control over the American government. You saw what happened last time he lost the election. Even judges that he himself appointed ruled against him because the United States has a strong, independent judiciary. That he tried to do all kinds of funny business in with the Attorney General's office. It didn't happen because they have strong, independent structures in place. So my hope is that Ghana learns to build institutions, because if you don't, then you are begging the politicians to politicize these institutions. They underfund them, they poorly train them, they poorly equip them, and they reward leadership who are loyal to political parties rather than to their nation. That is no way to run a state. You are heading towards trouble, and every now and then when the military misbehaves, the politicians cover for them. You saw what happened at Shaman. The politicians were coming into the public domain defending them. But there is no independent institutions in Ghana that's strong enough to hold the military to account and to hold the politicians who dabble in this politicization to account. So we are always, in one small emergency away from a complete disaster. I think the IGP has done a good enough job, but I don't think even the IGP can withstand strong political interference. If somebody in government really, really wanted to cripple him, I don't think the IGP is strong enough to, as strong as he is, in terms of integrity, I don't think he's strong enough to say no to a very, very corrupt political boss. And the military, who knows? And there's a lot of opacity around how they are funded and what kind of what kind of things they are allowed to do. The case that you cited, how somebody came from national security and simply said that in the United States that wouldn't happen. In the United States, the military are not even allowed to wear uniforms off the base. In Ghana, look at the military people. They walk around as if they are in a battle zone, wearing camouflage, attending funerals with their military uniform. It's part of the intimidation. You drive around Accra, and they have, they own the best real estate in Accra, the beaches. They have their bases there, and they have their military vehicles parked. You drive around Labadi, the Bema camp area. You're not even allowed to park. And even the military people who run civilian institutions. Look at the Kofi Annan Institute for Peacekeeping. The guy over there, the commandant over there. Every time I've seen him in public, he's wearing camouflage as if he's on a battlefield. But it's not just Ghana. Look at Burkina Faso, the head of state. He shows up in army fatigues and with biker gang paraphernalia on. It's all meant to intimidate people. It's meant to let you think that the military are top of the food chain and they can intimidate you, even when they are civilian spaces. And a lot of it is poor training. They don't understand that when they are in civilian spaces, they are supposed to be protectors of the public, not the intimidators and the violators of the public trust. And again, it goes back to the roots of Africa's military to begin with. Remember, these are colonially inherited military forces that were, set up to essentially help, they were not put together to protect us, but they are military. And we should have an input in how they are trained. And sometimes it's simply proper training to let them understand that we expect them to protect us, not to intimidate us. There's nothing to be proud of if people are afraid of you. But there are basic things that you can have. For example, I don't think that you should be allowed as a military officer to go to a funeral or a festival in your hometown with Ghana government provided uniforms on, so you can go and intimidate people. But that's what we do. So it's part of the culture.
All right, thank you very much. Alex, let me come to you. Dr. Newman raised the issue of the IGP. We've seen that the IGP came to power, right? He's been able to professionalize the army, the police force, right? But he raised the issue of the capacity of the police service, right? Do you think that is that where we are lacking? We are lacking in the sense of providing the police with the capacity to be able to deal with elections instead of getting the army involved. But the army should not be involved at all in civilian law enforcement, right? But if the police are given the necessary who are trained and capacity to be able to deal with this election, will not be getting the army involved. Would you subscribe to that?
Okay. We know when you say capacity, it comes in the several forms, from the numbers of the police personnel to equipment to training and everything. The issue is how much of our budget goes into preparing the police for such jobs. How funded is the Ghana Police Service and maybe other institutions? So if that is what we want, if we want the police that will be everywhere and do everything as we expect them to be, including places like Boku, then it means that, yes, they are in Boku anyway, but Boku is a joint operation with the military and police. If we want the Ghana police to take care of all the internal security and the military to completely go to the barracks, then we have to deliberately resource the police service and then make them accountable. I think if we do just these two, a lot will change. Resource them, give them all the, of course, they can't get everything, but the basic resources that we think the Ghana police needs, give them. Make sure that they are well taken care of in terms of their equipment, remuneration, everything that the professional police is supposed to get. When you can provide that and hold them accountable, I think there are a lot of things that the police can do and do very well. And I think it's not only the police. There are so many institutions that a lot of things happen. People think that, oh, nothing will happen to me, either because my party is in power or I know some big people out there or whatever it is. So I think if we can do these two, resource them relatively well, holding them accountable, I think a lot can change. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, the election is just a week away from tomorrow, right? Given what is at stake, right? Dr. Neo, what do you think? Even though we've seen that historically.
I lost you.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that
the microphone.
Yeah, the election is next week, Saturday, right? Mm-hmm. Given what is at stake, right? The NDC is bringing a former president, and we have the NPP trying to bring the 8th. What are some of your projections in terms of election violence? Are we going to see a reduction in election violence, or there's going to be an escalation given what is at stake? And given the conduct of the Electoral Commission?
Again, I have no idea what's going to happen. I can only tell you what I'm hoping will happen, which is that whoever loses this election accepts the results and becomes a leader to their party and calms tempers down. Whoever wins also has a responsibility to reach out and be a leader for the nation and not encourage people to go out, jubilating wildly because it hurts to lose elections. So the way you carry yourself when you win matters. The way you carry yourself when you lose also matters. I expect professionalism, at least from the police, because I think the IGP is very professional. I expect there's going to be some glitches here and there, but there are differences. There's intentional mismanagement and corruption of the electoral processes, and there are, kind of unexpected glitches. After all, this is Ghana. Nothing happens without a glitch. We are inefficient in how we do certain things. So, for example, this ballot paper shortage. I don't think that that's corruption or somebody's trying to steal the elections. It's just inefficiency. We are inefficient as a nation. Tell me one thing that we do perfectly. Look at even the way look at our soccer team. We have all the talents. We can't get anything done because so there's going to be some of that. There's going to be glitches. There's going to be, accidents here and there. But if the people who are running elections are above board and they come and they explain, transparency is important. So we need the media involved. If they give access to civil society groups, as I said, the electoral commissions are not the only one running these elections. There's the Cordeo is there. The independent electoral observers are there. We have international observers that are there. So what all these people say, if they said, "Oh, there's a genuine mix-up here, let's resolve it," and it's also about the scale. If it's rampant, but if we see evidence that people are being prevented from voting in certain areas, and it happens in both camps. The NDC does it, the MPP does it. I forgot, I think 2020, the elections, Elizabeth Ohne wrote a whole piece about this, where her brother, who was an MPP candidate in the Volta region, was prevented from even voting in the area where he was represented. There's all kinds of stuff that happens over there. If we prevent crazy things like that from happening, and the elections are generally free and fair, and there's a clear winner, I don't think that there's going to be violence. But if there's, reports of electoral malpractice, observers not being allowed to observe the process, civil society candidates, observers being bad, the media being bad, some kind of delay in releasing results when it's clear that one party has lost, all those things, you're going to have problems. And I don't think that we have the capacity to manage that dispute, especially if the NDC is threatening not to rely on the courts. And I don't blame them, because there's, the courts having shown us that they can resolve conflicts in an unbiased manner. And they have all kinds of reasons to question the manipulation of the courts, what's happening with the parliamentary majority case, for example. And again, that shows us how really weak our judicial system is, a system that allows the president to appoint as many judges as he wants. You look at the United States, they have to wait for somebody to die first before they can appoint a new judge onto the Supreme Court. So when you leave that uncapped, you're asking for trouble. And the thing that frustrates me about Ghana is that we have problems and we keep creating new ones, and we get the small things wrong and we get the big things wrong. And so that shouldn't be an issue at all. You shouldn't have a system where a new president can just appoint as many judges as he or she wants, because that's asking for trouble. It means that nobody will rely on the courts. And if people cannot rely on the courts, then they seek other alternatives to solving their conflicts. And then that's where we get into violence.
All right, thank you very much. Right, Alex, let me come to you. Dr. Newman mentioned inefficiency. Let's focus on the Electoral Commission. We saw what happened in 2020 with changing the results over and over and over again. Now, look at the conduct of the Electoral Commission, right? They're trying to put a curb on media houses. We see what is happening right now. And is their inefficiency, right, creating in people's mind, right, that the election is going to be rigged for a political party, thereby preparing people to seek violence as a last option based on their behavior, the conduct of the Electoral Commission.
Okay, so for a large majority of Ghanaians, we think that after 8 years, certain scenario must emerge. So, yes, people think that, okay, this is the time things must change hand from party A to party B. And then within that, there are a lot of things that has happened. All the things that you mentioned. And it appears that this time the other party, their enthusiasm to break the eight is there. And it began 4 years ago. So there's this uncertainty and fear people are having. And it's going to play out whatever happens, as Dr. Nema has said. It's going to look like, okay, yes, we saw it coming. We saw it coming. So I think that from now to the time we'll be told who has won the election, the Electoral Commission has still that opportunity to let Ghanaians feel that, hey, yes, whatever happened might have been things that were beyond us, but we are committed to make sure that whoever wins the election is the person we are going to announce or declare. That opportunity is still there. Like you said, those...
Go ahead. I think the Electoral Commission made that statement yesterday. They made that statement yesterday.
Okay. Those incidents of, okay, ballot papers arriving late, machines not working, those things, yes. In the military, we say 10% casualty is allowed. We may hear some of these things, but I don't think that is going to mar the election completely. So I expect that we are going to have a very good election come next week and beyond. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, Dr. You have the last closing word.
I just want to echo what he said. I hope that we have a peaceful election, and I hope that when the Electoral Commission screws up, it's actually the result of a screw up, and they will own up to it, and not the results of a conspiracy, because that's different. If they are actually trying to put their thumb on the scale for a particular candidate, that's a different thing. But if they screw up, after all, it's Ghana. People will allow for some of those screw ups to happen, as long as it doesn't sway the elections in a big way. And again, this is established. So we already know this stuff. There's a predictability element to this election where we already know there's already an anti-incumbency wave sweeping the world. And people, the results will not be a surprise if the NDC wins. If the MPP manages to win, it will be a surprise. And they better have evidence that there has been no illegal manipulation. And so that's the thing that we should be praying for. So if Bawumia wins this election, everything has to be above board. And the NDC has the right to insist on inspecting the evidence. And that evidence has to be publicly available. We shouldn't have to wait for any committee to be set up. It has to be as transparent as possible. If he doesn't win, and people don't think that he's going to win, I don't know, because the polling can be off, and the polling is not always reliable in Ghana. But if he doesn't win, he also has to understand that this is not the end of the line. People have lost elections and come back and won. John Mahama himself lost, and his comeback. Mills lost many times, came back. Akufo-Addo lost many times. So he needs to understand he's a young guy. As long as the country doesn't break, this is not a make or break election for Ghana. There will be another election tomorrow, and both parties have to understand that. And so I'm glad that the NDC, in spite of the fact that they didn't get the things that they wanted, ended up signing this peace pact, because they have more to lose in this election than Bawumia does if there is chaos after the elections, because this is an election that they are expected to win. And so it's again, if you are to whom much is given, much is expected. So if you are the one that's expected to win the election, it's in your interest to make sure that the post-election period is managed as smoothly as possible. And so they coming out and saying that, okay, we accept all of this. And by the way, they've also remember they left IPAC and they rejoined IPAC. And so that's also good. It's also a sign of maturity. And I think that because Mahama is also, a very stable guy. And so that's the other thing. He's a stable guy. He's a level-headed guy. So he's not a chaotic person that's going to, run to the guns right away if he loses an election, that kind of stuff. He's lost election once and accepted the defeat, and now he gets a chance to come back. So I hope that the MPP guys can also realize that. And again, sometimes when you lose, it's not because the election was stolen. Maybe it's because you had a weak candidate and you need to go back and find a better candidate. Or maybe a weak candidate lost, but that weak candidate can live to fight another day. They can improve themselves. Wait, after all, Mahama if he wins this election, his term limited. He's only going to be there for 4 years, same as Donald Trump. He can run again. You can get another chance. Don't destroy the country. Don't encourage your supporters to go out and kill anybody or get into trouble because there's another election. And that's the beauty of a democracy. We always going to have another election. And so let's hope for the best. Let's wish everybody well. Let's challenge them to show leadership when they win and to show leadership when they lose. And let's hope that our institutions can minimize the chaos and in their incompetence. And let's hope that there is no appetite for violence if the elections don't go the way we expect it to go.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Nuyama and Alex. And another thank you to Martin, who has checked off. On this note, I say a big thank you to you and other panelists who are joining us. We hope to see you next week if we have to come to cover the election. So on this note, I say, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Let me thank you, Dr. Nuyama, because you are supposed to be having Thanksgiving, and I still got you over here.
Hopefully next week we'll have a better reason to give thanks.
Sure. Thank you very much. All right. So on this note, I say, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hoping to see you next week. All right.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for meeting you. Happy Thanksgiving wherever you are. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.